Hi, everyone. My name is Michaela Tenney, and I work with Share Church at the United Methodist Church of the Resurrection in the Kansas City area. I'm excited to be with you guys today, even though it's virtually. I moved here about 6 months ago from Stuart, and I worked at First United Methodist Church for almost 8 years. I've done a couple of these in-service days with you guys, and usually it's in person. So for those of you who I know and I miss, hello. To those of you who I have not yet met, I look forward to meeting you hopefully in the near future. Now, rumor has it that Miss Sam is going to let you guys go a little bit earlier than usual for one of these in-service days. So I promise not to take up too much of your time. So we'll just go ahead and dive right on in. Now, I know that the verse that you guys are studying today is a very succinct verse. Let all that you do be done in love. And it's a beautiful concept. It sounds wonderful, until that coworker that you have that just gets on your last nerve says that one thing that just makes every little bit of love in your heart go out the window. It sounds like a great concept until your spouse or your kids just dance on your last nerve, and everything that you thought you had inside of you, all that love that you were prepared to respond with, is just gone. And then, sometimes it's the students that are in your classes, the students that you care for day in and day out, and they just kind of lose their minds, which makes you lose a little bit of the love that you have for them. Just a little bit, not all of it, but sometimes there are days like that. So it's this beautiful concept that the Apostle Paul has articulated here. Let all that you do be done with love. I mean, it sounds pretty, it sounds Christ-like, and sometimes it sounds impossible. I mean, with everything that we all have going on in our lives, this love thing, it seems like a nice thing to try to attain, a nice thing to try to emulate in our lives, but it also seems largely unattainable. It can sometimes feel as if this response that we're supposed to have to everyone is something that can just be just out of reach in terms of us trying to make it happen all the time. And sometimes we're having really great days, and we come to events like this and we get pumped up a little bit and we say, you know what? I am going to take this to heart. I'm going to let everything that I do be done in love. And so next week, I'll start everything off and I'll make sure that I respond with love, that I do things in love. And then by the time you get to Wednesday, everything somehow has flown out the window. And I get it. I have been there. And I feel like the Apostle Paul had been there also because he gave us a little bit of instruction before he said those few words, let all that you do be done in love. So I want for us to dig a little deeper into what Paul said to us. But before we do that, I would like for you guys to just use your imagination a little bit. I want you to look at the instructions that Paul gave, but instead of picturing him as the Apostle Paul writing this beautiful letter, I want for us to imagine that Paul is an army general or sergeant, somebody who's in charge of others, and he is imparting wisdom and knowledge that these soldiers are going to have to take into battle. So you can picture him with all of his army regalia and all of his stature, and you can picture these soldiers standing at attention, ready and willing to hear what Paul has to say. And so Paul speaks these words to them, and I want you to use your imagination to picture this, because the way that Paul wrote this letter to the church at Corinth, it was a way of using military terms to explain what he wanted them to do. And so he writes this letter with 16 chapters, and as he's wrapping things up at the end of the 16th chapter, this is what he says to them, and he uses military terms to explain it. So we're picturing Paul, and here's what he starts to say to the people who are at the church in Corinth. The first thing he says is, "Be watchful." So Paul is telling them to keep their eyes open, be diligent, and make sure that you're paying attention to the situation at hand. in order to really commit to a mission, to commit to something that you have said that you're going to do, you have to be watchful, be alert, be paying attention to what's going on around you. When you're going into the heat of battle, there's so many things that come flying at you in so many situations and scenarios you have to be ready to respond to. You can't do any of that if you're not being watchful. And I want us to pay attention to the way that Paul uses this wording because he uses the present tense. So this is something that we're supposed to take to heart now and use in the present. It's not something that we hope for. It's not something that we look for how we used in the past. It's something we're supposed to do right here and right now. So we have to be watchful because you can't let all that you do be done in love if you're not diligently committed, if you're not paying attention and being alert. If you're not watchful and alert, then you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes that could cost you dearly, that could cost the people that are around you dearly, because you have to be watchful and alert for the dangerous things that are going to fly at you and try to keep you from your goal, to keep you from the mission that you're on. And so we have to make sure that we are watchful as we let that influence how we respond in love. The second thing that Paul says is he says, stand firm in the faith. Now, there are going to be all kinds of distractions that come at you as you're living life, as you're committed to this goal of letting all that you do be done in love. And what Paul is wanting us to do is stand firm in our faith and make sure that everything else that's out there to distract you, it doesn't knock you off your guard. It doesn't allow you to be fooled by all of these other things that will try to influence who you are and how you behave in the world. He's saying, no, stand firm in your faith. Stand firm in your faith in God. We have priorities. We have ways that we're supposed to do things, and we need to make sure that we stand firm in that. There's so many other things in life that we attempt to stand firm in instead of standing firm in our faith. Sometimes we choose to stand firm in our politics and we let our politics inform who we are and how we behave and what we do. But that's not what is required of us. We're to stand firm in our faith in God and let that inform who we are and how we behave. We're not to stand firm in our insecurity and in our fears and in the things that make us anxious or nervous. We're to stand firm in our faith. And so you can't let all those other things that would distract you prevent you from standing firm in your faith, because you can't let all that you do be done in love if you're not firmly standing in your faith in God. Now, the next thing that Paul talks about, it can be translated a couple of different ways. In one translation, it says, act like men. Now, I don't want us to get distracted by that because, like I said, Paul was using military terms to explain this. And so he wasn't really talking about act like men in terms of masculinity. Paul is saying, act like adults. It's more about a life stage. And so Paul is instructing us to make sure that we're not distracted and being childish in our way of thinking and handling things. We are to act like grown adults. We're to act like we have all of the wisdom and knowledge afforded to us, having gone through life and been around the block a couple of different times. So we're supposed to act like adults and basically be mature, is what Paul is saying. Be mature about the way that you handle situations. Be mature about the way that you discern how you're going to proceed in life. This is what Paul is saying, because in order to let all that you do be done in love, we can't act like children. We can't act like we are not adults that have our prefrontal cortex to use to think about how we do things. We have to be mature. Now, the last thing Paul says before he gets to the heart of it is be strong. And I want for us to take a minute and re examine the way that we think about strength and what it means to be strong. Because often we think of strength as a certain amount of toughness, the ability to withstand certain situations. And so I want to challenge you to re examine how you think about the definition of strength, because I would argue that it takes more strength to cry when you need to actually express all of your emotions. It takes more strength to admit when you're wrong in a situation. It takes more strength to ask for help in situations when you need it. It takes more strength to be vulnerable, to be who you really are in situations instead of hiding behind a mask or trying to hide who you are from the world. It takes more strength to actually trust other people. It takes more strength to go to therapy. As an African American woman, the idea of therapy and seeking out mental health is something that in our culture can sometimes be a little frowned upon. It's kind of this undercurrent, this idea that says, as an African American woman, we have to be strong. We have to, make sure that we're independent. We're not going to go sit on somebody's couch and tell a stranger our problems. No, we're gonna fix things ourselves. We're gonna stick to our guns and make sure that we handle situations in a way that doesn't rely on other people. Now, thankfully, I was raised in a family where the idea of marriage counseling wasn't something that was foreign. My parents were very good about setting that example. They were very good about making sure that we as children sought out the wisdom of other people to speak into our lives and our situations. But the idea of actively pursuing mental health was not something that was really talked about. It wasn't something that we did. And so I had to learn on my own when I moved out of my family home that taking ownership of seeking mental health and getting therapy to make sure that I could handle everything that was coming my way, that was a healthy thing. And I could own that. And there was freedom in that. I think there is strength in being able to do something like that. There is strength in the vulnerability of trusting somebody else to help you with your problems, to give you perspective on how to proceed in life. So my challenge to you is, where do you need to figure out how to change that definition of strength to make sure that you're not using it in a way that just likens it to toughness, but in a way that there's more nuance to it, that there's more to breathe into that idea of strength, because that's what I think Paul is trying to communicate. When Paul says be strong, it's not just be physically strong, because being physically strong is not the only thing you need on a battlefield. So, in order to let all that we do be done in love, we have to be strong. So, to recap, the things that Paul has told us and encouraged us to do are to be watchful, to stand firm in our faith, to be mature, and to be strong. It's with all of those things as necessary constants that we're actually able to let all that we do be done in love. And so, in our imaginative visual of Paul as this official who is imparting this wisdom on his subordinates, we can picture them receiving all of this information in a very sir, yes, sir attitude, because they're going to have to take this into battle. These wise and encouraging words, they all sound great, but then a soldier has to actually do them. The readers of Corinthians had to actually take to heart what Paul said and utilize that in their lives. And so do we. There, there was a soldier during World War II who had been sent with his team to go and fight a battle in Okinawa. It was a very, very dangerous spot that they were sent to in order to fight their part of World War II. And what they were instructed to do was climb this ridge way up high, and on the other side of that ridge was the enemy. They had the higher ground, and so this team was being sent basically to try to overpower the enemy, push back, and take over that enemy turf. And so soldiers, they were being killed left and right. They were being maimed and injured. And during this battle, there was one soldier in particular who scratched and clawed his way through the dirt to get to as many of his fallen brothers as he could to help them in their ultimate time of need. I mean, there's bullets whizzing past him, there's bombs going off left and right, and this one particular soldier managed to save and lower 75 men back down the ridge to safety. He did all of this without carrying a single weapon or ever firing a shot at the enemy that was trying their hardest to kill him. This soldier's name was Desmond Doss, and he was a conscientious objector in the war, which meant he was willing to serve his country, but he was unwilling to do so by killing anyone else, by picking up a weapon. See, Doss, he was a Christian. His denomination was Seventh-day Adventist, and he didn't believe that God wanted him to kill others. And so, without a weapon to defend himself, he had to climb Hacksaw Ridge with all of his other fellow soldiers, and he had made the decision that he was going to protect them the best that he could without a weapon. And so he would crawl into battle and he would find someone that desperately needed help who was wounded, and he would drag them back to the edge of the ridge. He would tie a rope around them, he would tie a rope around himself, and then with his own raw and bloodied hands, he would lower them all the way back down that ridge. Now, none of us have to wake up next week and go and climb a ridge and risk our lives for what we have to do. But sometimes waking up each day and tending to our families, managing the students that we have to work with, managing their parents, teaching the children, dealing with work drama, dealing with a global pandemic, or managing this divisive political climate that we're living in, all of those things can feel like it's impossible to truly lead with love, to make sure that our actions are filled with love. Going into all of those things can start to feel like heading into battle unarmed. After all, it feels like everybody else is armed. But Paul, he said that in order to truly let all that we do be done in love, we have to be watchful. We have to be firm in our faith. We have to be mature, and we have to be strong. And I believe that that's what Desmond Doss did. He was diligent in the way that he approached his situation. There were so many times that he could have given up. They would have gladly sent him home. But he was alert to his situation and knew that he had to keep going because he was committed to the cause. Desmond, he stood firm in his faith. His conviction said that he could serve his country, but he had to do it without harming someone else. And so he stood firm in his faith, even when he was being bullied for his beliefs, and then even on the battlefield when his life was at stake, and he still chose to help his fellow man without picking up a weapon. Desmond, he was mature because, in all of these situations, he had to figure out what his response was going to be. He was going to stick to his convictions, but without being snarky about it, without trying to make other people feel bad about it, without trying to harm anyone else. He was mature about his situation. And he was strong, not just physically strong, he was mentally strong to be able to go out into battle again and again in risking his life to save others. He was strong. And the thing about it is I believe that he took love seriously. He took God's love for himself and for others very seriously. I believe that he saw that when Christ said, love your neighbors, he saw other people truly as his neighbor. And so he saw value in other humans, but he also saw value in himself. And so the love that God had for his neighbors, the love that God had for others, he truly believed in that, but he also believed in the love that God had for himself. That love that he had for himself allowed him to truly see the value in other people. It was that love for himself and that love for others, I believe, that helped him get 75 humans off that ridge and to safety. So I'm going to end with this. Do you love yourself enough to see your own value and in turn see that value in others? Because you can't see that value in others if you haven't truly seen that value in yourself. That means that you have to accept the love that God has for you so that you can truly see the love that God has for other people and treat them the way that you're supposed to. Because when you can see how very, very loved you are, then you can see how much God loves your friends, but how much God loves your enemies. and the people that try to distract you from your goal of leading with love, and the people who try to discourage you, and the people who don't mean to discourage you but do so anyway. God loves them. And I feel like when you accept that love for yourself and you can see the love that God has for other people, that means that you can get up and go into battle and face whatever is happening in battle completely unarmed and ready to let everything that you do be done in love.